Welcome to Briefing 1 of 6 of the CipherVibe Cybersecurity for Beginners course. Today we will make post-quantum cryptography and zero trust in 2026 understandable, practical, and connected to the rest of your learning path. Zero trust says trust must never be implicit and access must be continually evaluated, but those decisions still depend on cryptographic proofs. In 2026, the urgent work is crypto-agility, finding vulnerable public key dependencies, prioritizing long-lived data and identities, and migrating without creating downgrade paths or operational outages. The purpose of this lesson is not to memorize a collection of terms. It is to build a mental model you can apply when tools, platforms, and threats change. We will define the core ideas, walk through a repeatable defensive workflow, examine mistakes that frequently mislead beginners, design useful safeguards, and finish with a safe portfolio exercise. Throughout the course, remember that security work begins with authorization, scope, and evidence. Use the exercises only on local systems you own or environments you have explicit written permission to assess. Pause when you need to. Write concepts in your own words, record observations, and distinguish what the evidence proves from what you are merely assuming. That habit is more valuable than rushing through another tool demonstration. Start with 4 concepts that provide the vocabulary for post-quantum cryptography and zero trust in 2026. First, a cryptographically relevant quantum computer would threaten RSA, finite field Diffie-Hellman, elliptic curve key exchange, and common digital signatures, while symmetric cryptography is affected differently. Second, NIST has standardized MLKM for key establishment, MLDSA for general-purpose signatures, and SLHDSA as a stateless hash-based signature option. Third, zero trust policy engines depend on device certificates, workload identities, signed tokens, software provenance, telemetry integrity, and protected control plane channels. Fourth, harvest now decrypt later risk makes encrypted data with a long secrecy lifetime a current migration priority even before a cryptographically relevant quantum computer exists. Do not study these as isolated definitions. Ask which asset or business service is involved, where the relevant trust boundary sits, which identity performs the action, and what reliable evidence would show that the control worked. Security reasoning is a chain. Source evidence supports an observation. The observation supports a conclusion. The conclusion informs a proportionate decision. The decision has an owner, an expected result, and a way to verify it. When any link is missing, say so. A professional explanation can include uncertainty without becoming vague. For example, a network record may prove that 2 addresses communicated, but it may not prove which human initiated the action or whether the content was malicious. Use diagrams whenever a relationship is difficult to explain in a sentence. Mark identities, systems, data flows, boundaries, and controls. A simple, accurate diagram is more useful than a crowded picture that implies knowledge you do not have. Now turn the mental model into a repeatable workflow. First, an attacker records encrypted traffic or acquires protected archives today, preserving ciphertext for later decryption if key exchange becomes breakable. Second, the defender inventories where vulnerable algorithms appear across public key infrastructure, TLS termination, identity federation, service meshes, virtual private networks, firmware, and code signing. Third, migration pilots introduce post-quantum or hybrid mechanisms, test size and latency effects, validate interoperability, and detect downgrade behavior. Fourth, policy decisions must bind the negotiated cryptography, identity proof, device posture, and session context so a modern algorithm cannot mask a weak trust path. Fifth, operations continuously observe certificate failures, rejected algorithms, stale endpoints, vendor readiness, and emergency rollback without silently restoring obsolete protection. Before acting, define the objective, scope, owner, and success condition. Collect the smallest amount of trustworthy evidence needed to understand the situation. Preserve timestamps and sources so another person can follow your reasoning. Priorities should be explainable. Consider exposure, identity and privilege, sensitive data, business importance, exploit conditions, existing safeguards, reversibility, and confidence. A dramatic label should never replace that analysis. The workflow does not end when a command succeeds, a ticket closes, or a dashboard turns green. Verify the new state with fresh evidence. Check for recurrence and for side effects introduced by the change. Document the result in plain language: what you observed, what you concluded, what you changed, who approved it, what evidence confirms the outcome, and what uncertainty remains. This disciplined loop, observe, interpret, decide, act, verify, and learn, appears in every cybersecurity specialty. Understanding failure modes will protect you from attractive but unreliable shortcuts. First, replacing internet-facing TLS while ignoring internal certificates, signed tokens, firmware validation, backups, and machine identities creates false confidence. Second, treating a hybrid handshake as automatically secure can hide implementation bugs, downgrade paths, weak randomness, or incorrect composition. Third, large post-quantum keys and signatures can stress-constrained devices, network middleboxes, certificate chains, and existing protocol limits. Fourth, rushing migrations without asset ownership and rollback testing can disrupt authentication and push teams toward unsafe exceptions. Fifth, calling zero trust broken confuses a durable security model with the cryptographic mechanisms used to implement it. These mistakes often share one cause: confusing an available signal with a complete explanation. A tool can report a finding, a successful action, or a score while important scope, context, ownership, and verification remain missing. Avoid absolute claims. Words such as secure, compromised, fixed, and compliant require scope and evidence. Prefer precise statements such as, "This control blocked the tested path under these conditions," or "The available records show this identity used the service," but do not identify the human operator. Also resist copying commands without understanding their inputs, outputs, permissions, and side effects. Run one controlled change at a time and record what happened. If an exercise does not behave as expected, that is useful evidence. Stop, inspect the environment, revise the hypothesis, and explain the difference. Good security work is not a performance of certainty, it is careful reasoning under imperfect information. Reliable security uses layers because no single control can prevent every failure. First, build a cryptographic inventory tied to business services, data lifetime, identity flows, owners, and replacement dependencies. Second, prioritize high-value long-lived data, certificate authorities, code signing routes, administrative access, and externally exposed key exchange. Third, adopt crypto-agile interfaces, algorithm identifiers, telemetry, test vectors, and versioned policy so algorithms can change without redesigning every application. Fourth, test hybrid and post-quantum deployments for downgrade resistance, interoperability, resource consumption, failure recovery, and audit evidence. Fifth, keep zero trust fundamentals, strong identity, least privilege, device posture, segmentation, explicit policy, continuous evaluation, and verified telemetry. For each important risk, ask 5 questions. What makes the event less likely? What evidence would reveal it? Who can contain it? How will trustworthy operation be restored? Who owns the decision and accepts remaining risk? Least privilege applies to people, applications, devices, automation, data stores, and administrators. Access should be scoped, separated, monitored, reviewed, and removed when it is no longer needed. Every important control needs a test strategy. Include representative normal activity, negative cases, misuse, dependency failure, and rollback. A written policy is not evidence that a technical or operational control works. Design for humans. A safeguard that is impossible to use correctly will be bypassed. Provide safe defaults, understandable messages, usable recovery, and clear escalation. Finally, preserve the evidence trail from observation through decision, action, and verification. That history supports investigations, audits, lessons learned, and honest measurement. Turn this briefing into an action plan. First, complete a cryptographic discovery sprint and map every critical dependency to an accountable owner. Second, classify data by secrecy lifetime and exposure to harvest now decrypt later collection. Third, pilot NIST standard algorithms in representative identity and transport paths before broad rollout. Fourth, require vendors to provide algorithm inventories, migration roadmaps, interoperability evidence, and secure rollback plans. Fifth, measure adoption and exception expiry while continuing to test the complete zero trust decision path. Make the work measurable. Useful indicators for this topic include critical cryptographic dependencies inventoried, long-lived data paths prioritized, post-quantum pilot success rate, downgrade tests passed, and time-bound migration exceptions. Define the owner, source, review frequency, and limitation for every measure. Do not treat a product purchase or a single patch as completion. Retest the end-to-end trust path, preserve evidence, and track exceptions until the risk is demonstrably reduced. The broader lesson is that modern security failures cross layers: identity, software, infrastructure, hardware, operations, and governance. Defenders need an architecture that remains trustworthy when one layer fails. For the primary source links and chapter markers, open the description. For more evidence-based cybersecurity research, visit cyphervibe.com/news and subscribe to CipherVibe. CipherVibe is operated by CloudSecTech LLC. Copyright 2026. All rights reserved. This briefing is general education. Never test a system without explicit written authorization.